this is a good hill to fight on, because the courts have been clear in recent decisions that the president's got these prerogatives. I printed out the brief, and I want you to read it, because like Stephen Miller's video we played earlier, it nicely summarizes, and it's you don't have to be, I'm not a lawyer, I read it, I thought it was great. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand the issues at hand in terms of the threat to our constitutional republic through the unelected, unaccountable power, unelected bureaucrats exercising unaccountable power with the help of judges validating it and trying to constrain the people's president. On page 1, or yes, literally page 1, this case involves an unprecedented assault, and this is the brief filed with the Supreme Court to overturn that lower court ruling on what is the employee running the Office of Special Counsel, a federal bureaucrat. The case involves an unprecedented assault on the separation of powers that warrants immediate relief. What is the separation of powers? I want to remind you what it is. It is the powers of the government, the legislative, executive, and judicial powers, are spread among the three branches of the federal government. And what is the value of the separation of powers? It's designed to protect your liberty. When you have any official exercising executive, legislative, and judicial powers, that's a dictatorship. So it's not just the trite phrase of art related to the Constitution. It's a core, it's the fundamental structure of our government that the founders designed to ensure our freedoms won't be abused by an out-of-control, all-powerful politician exercising all the powers of government in one office. So the executive power is reserved for the executive, the hiring and firing. The judicial power, they resolve cases. They don't get to run the executive branch. And in this case, you had a judge trying to hijack the presidency. As this court observed just last term, Congress cannot act on and courts cannot examine the president's actions on subjects within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, including the president's unrestricted power of removal with respect to executive officers of the United States whom the president has appointed. As to such principal officers, the most important of his subordinates, the president's management of the executive branch requires him to have unrestricted power to remove them in their most important duties. Enjoining the president and preventing him from exercising these powers thus inflicts the gravest of injuries on the executive branch and the separation of powers. And so the next paragraph goes into prior court rulings reaffirming this power on the part of the president. Thus, when President Trump, later in the page, on February 7, 2025, removed Respondent Hampton Dellinger as the single head of the Office of Special Counsel, he engaged in an uncontroversial exercise of his Article II powers. Article II is the section of the Constitution, the article of the Constitution, delineating the president's executive powers, vesting executive authority of the federal government in the president himself. Since the Carter administration, the executive branch has repeatedly expressed the view that tenure protections for the head of the Office of Special Counsel violate the Constitution. So what Congress has tried to do is limit the president's executive power by installing and adding requirements in order for someone to be fired by the president. Either notice requirements or other requirements giving them a term through which the president can't fire him or her at will. That is because the agency presents a particularly clear-cut case. Investigative and prosecutorial decision-making is the special province of the executive branch. And the Constitution vests the entirety of the executive power in the president, as I said. The Office of Special Counsel operates as a self-described investigative and prosecutorial agency. So it's exactly the type of office that a president needs to have unfettered ability to run because we voted for him to do so. It enforces federal law governing federal employment and federal whistleblowers, issues subpoenas and rules, and in some circumstances can require other agency heads to conduct an investigation and submit a written report. The president's removal of that person accordingly implicated two preclusive presidential powers: the power to remove and the power to control investigative and prosecutorial decision-making. So who should control investigative and prosecutorial decision-making? A prior appointee of President Biden, or the person who was actually elected to be his successor as President of the United States, President Trump? The answer is obvious. And here you get a judicial coup taking place as described in this brief. Yet within hours of respondent filing suit, the respondent being Dellinger, the Office of Special Counsel guy who was fired, the district court, a lower court, issued an order at 8:35 p.m. labeled as an administrative stay. The order restored that guy to the office from which the president removed him, enjoined any efforts to impede his access to the resources or materials of that office, and barred the president from installing any other person as special counsel. On February 12th, the district court then issued an opinion granting a temporary restraining order enjoining the president and other senior executive branch officials and restoring the respondent to office. Fired by the president, hired by the courts. It's absurd. Until now, as far as we are aware, no court in American history has wielded an injunction to force the president to retain an agency head whom the president believes should not be entrusted with executive power, and to prevent the president from relying on his preferred replacement. Yet the district court remarkably found in no irreparable harm to the president if he is judicially barred from exercising exclusive and preclusive powers of the presidency for at least 16 days, and perhaps for a month. Later in the brief, on page 4, this court should not allow lower courts to seize executive power by dictating to the president how long he must continue employing an agency head against his will. And the courts are saying, the lower courts, it's only 2 weeks. 2 weeks of no democracy, no rule of law. No, thank you. And so the government filed this on what day? I think it was earlier this week. It's not, oh, maybe it's dated at the end. February of 2025. Doesn't say the date. So Chief Justice Roberts, is the judge that handles emergency motions, or what could be termed as emergency motions. That may not be the legal term for this motion. It's an application to vacate the order issued by the United States District Court and request for an immediate administrative stay of that order. So Chief Justice Roberts is running it, and of course he'll be consulting with his colleagues as to what to do about it. And this is a good hill to fight on, because the courts have been clear in recent decisions that the president's got these prerogatives. And as I said in the beginning of this program, he this week also issued an executive order trying to marshal in and gather all these independent agencies that exercise executive power without the democratic check. President Trump is right now taking the biggest steps in modern American history to restore democratic rule to the United States in terms of the operations of our federal government. We have a Constitution that requires the democratically elected head of the president to exercise executive power, and he's trying to restore that on behalf of the voters. And he promised to do all of this. You know, I have to say, you hear campaigns and candidates say, well, we're going to do X, we're going to do Y, we're going to do Z, and it's like, well, I hope that gets done, but we'll see. Man, it's astonishing what President Trump has been doing. All within the law. I mean, there have been categories of actions that are obviously legal, that some are controversial, and some seem to kind of be at odds with the congressional rules or laws on the hiring and firing of staff. And his point is those rules are unconstitutional. I'm going to challenge them. As I say, to restore democracy. Yes, I know we're a constitutional republic. I do know that. But the head of our constitutional republic, at least the executive branch, is elected through a democratic election. And if those elections mean anything, it means he gets to run the government. Now here, in this case, we have the president trying to fire just one guy, and it's already at the Supreme Court. You see, the left is challenging his ability to basically fire anyone. I think I tweeted out something. I don't think we pulled it. You know, the left, and this is what happened during the first term. The left decided that the president can't be president, but he can't exercise the full powers of a president of the United States. He can't conduct foreign policy. When he went to fire Comey, he wasn't allowed to fire Comey, even though that is legally and constitutionally his authority. He's not allowed to be president. And the new rule now for Trump is he's not allowed to fire anyone in the government ever for practical purposes. Doesn't matter what the rules are. It's an outrage. He can't fire anyone. And obviously that's not the way it's supposed to work. And if we're going to get control of this government, we have to get control of the bureaucracy. I said it once and I'll say it again. We need political control of the administrative state. And yes, if there's a leftist running the government, that means you're going to get leftist policies implemented, hopefully only under the law. But that's the way it works. And when President Trump is elected, he should be able to get his policies implemented under the law. And the only way to do that, especially in the modern era, where the administrative state hates Republicans, especially hates conservatives, and is fanatically anti-Trump, is to A, cut back the bureaucracy, cut back its powers under law. Now, Congress can supplement that and assist by shutting down agencies, defunding agencies, making it easier. The president can do a lot to essentially shutter agencies, defang them in the meantime. And I got to hand it to President Trump. I didn't think we'd be talking about firing tens of thousands of employees from the federal government. It just wasn't on my list. And the left doesn't really know what to do. They really don't know what to do. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.